Ryan, good seeing you again.
Good to be here.
We just finished the last episode 5 minutes ago, so time to. It's not the month that goes by traditionally when the audience has to wait for these.
Man, I wish we got to see each other once a month.
Yeah, that would be nice, but unfortunately, the once every 6 months thing, though, you're a hard man to pin down. But I'll take what I can get for sure.
I get to spend more time with you than most of my friends. Once every 6 months would be a luxury for them.
I do. Yes, being only 3 hours away, I do feel honored that I get to visit every once in a while. It is still really hot on board this ship, so
it's getting cooler.
Yeah. Even though this episode comes out in the future, it's still July. Anyway, I want to talk to you today about a topic that is battleship adjacent.
Okay.
And something that we have not talked about on this channel before. And that is ocean liners.
Okay.
More specifically, the one that's like 2 miles this direction downriver here. SS United States. When I say battleship adjacent, I mean, this is a ship...
It is literally adjacent to the battleship You can see it from here.
Fair enough, yes. If we walk out this door here and look left, yes, you can actually see it. You're very funny. But I meant, this is a ship that has similar sort of size. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's very similar to an Iowa-class battleship in terms of size. It's also something that shares kind of some parts, especially in the machinery department. Mm-hmm. And a ship that ultimately, being the same size and kind of having the same type of machinery, but is not armored. This is a ship that's also very fast, but obviously the Iowa-class battleships were very fast for what they were. And of course, United States being in the news, not only now, but hypothetically by the time this episode airs, something will have happened. Mm-hmm. I think they were ordered to move by September.
Yeah, I believe that's what the most recent article we've read said.
Right. So we're going to get into United States and potentially her fate here in the next couple of months, right after the intro. So Ryan, ocean liners. Mm-hmm. What do you know? What do you like? Do you have a favorite one? Or is there a particular one that sort of piques your interest?
Honestly, I've never had much of an interest with ocean liners.
Really?
If it ain't painted gray and it don't have guns, don't mean nothing to me.
Yeah. Same thing for the audience, as I know everyone just clicked off and is not watching now.
Now...
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm going to put in a picture of Queen Mary painted battleship gray paint here, so you can see and observe.
Yeah. And some were used as armed merchant cruisers and things like that. Ocean liners are definitely a part of why I'm here. I grew up watching the National Geographic special on VHS with my grandparents about finding Titanic and Dr. Ballard and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Titanic is one of the first ships that I sort of experienced as a child, and it got me sort of interested in sort of large ships of sort of grand scale and everything else. And that I think is I think ocean liners are especially Titanic, are that gateway drug.
It is very much a gateway for sure. And everybody knows that Ryan liked boats.
Yeah.
Most people do not know much about boats.
Yeah.
So I get a tremendous amount of Titanic memorabilia because she is the boat that people can name.
It was a boat, therefore Ryan likes boats, and he must be interested in Titanic. Yeah.
So I've got a lot of Titanic memorabilia, even though she's not a huge interest of mine.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and even an Olympic class ship like Titanic is similar in sort of size.
Oh yeah.
This is a ship from 1912, 1911, that sort of time frame, is something similar in size in both length and displacement to New Jersey, and then we go a few more years even after that, and we get to things like Queen Mary and Normandy from French Line, and those ships are sort of even bigger, and just as fast as New Jersey, and sort of like the high or the 31, 32, 33, that kind of range. Of course, Iowas can go a little bit further when they're pressed, but those ships weigh a lot too. Those ships are significantly heavier in some cases, so it's just really interesting to see. You have the pinnacle of warships for the long time was the battleship. So then, of course, maybe the Iowa class is the obviously, as we know, after a few ships were canceled, and obviously, but the Iowa class would have remained sort of like the fastest battleships.
And certainly the pinnacle that is left to be visited.
Right, obviously without Yamato or something like that, which technically heavier but slower, and anyway, whatever. So for ocean liners, it's kind of something that you kind of have to pay attention to a little bit, just because again, the sheer scale and the engineering and the cost of those ships kind of puts them sort of in the top sort of realm with some of these other larger maybe warships. Now, United States, obviously, that ship is really one of the last examples of a ship from. Now, first off, United States is not from the 30s. United States is a post-war ship. With that being said, though, William Francis Gibbs, that he had always envisioned a grand ocean liner and of large scale.
In the European tradition.
Exactly. And this was a passion project of his that I think that predated the war. But he certainly needed, obviously, there was a lot of stuff that had to happen for that dream to realize. And I think that the things that had to happen was World War II. So, you get these sort of huge advancements in shipbuilding. Not to say that you couldn't build a large ship before the war, obviously you could. But I think sort of the timing was right. He got, Gibbs and Cox had all these government contracts, and, they had designed a lot of warships. And I think they just had, by the time the war was over, there was a lot of experience and a lot of sort of readily available machinery that could just be purchased and then installed. And I think that's so, United States is sort of born in, from that and in the 50s and everything else. Right?
And even more importantly, the United States, the country, watches Queen Mary outrun submarines and transport entire divisions across continents during the war.
We did a video on Queen Mary. We did a Battle Stars video, and Winston Churchill is quoted as saying that Queen Mary single-handedly shortened the war by a year. And at one point in time carried 17,000. Its peak trip carried 17,000 guys, to the European front, but then also participated in Magic Carpet and brought a lot of those guys home. And something did like 800,000 miles or something crazy, at just back and forth, high speed, outrunning U-boats the entire time, laughing as the, poor Type 7 U-boat, doing like 4 knots as Queen Mary goes by at like 32.
What was that?
Yeah, I know, you can't even torpedo it.
My God!
Yeah, exactly.
And the United States is certainly watching this and knows that we've got nothing like that, but there might be another war in Europe like that very soon with Russia and Soviet submarines. And we will have to send the American Army overseas in large numbers very quickly.
And the U.S. government saw that fact. They said, the British government had helped Cunard and White Star build a lot of these large ocean liners, and their ability, the British government, to just immediately call back on those companies and have this huge fleet of a lot of these like effectively high-speed transports, that could be requisitioned. Of course,
the captain and the crew are basically reservists, so you get the ship, you get the personnel, ready to go.
Exactly, and it takes just a little bit of refitting. You pull off, the luxury amenities, and you fill it full of bunks, and have guys sleeping out on the decks in shifts, and you send it, as fast as you possibly can, and you lighten the load on the ship too, and it gets even faster,
And much like battleships, though, in peacetime, these are national prestige symbols. They're competing for the Blue Riband, so there is national honor on the line. They're hugely reported about. So there is a benefit, even when the government isn't using them, to subsidizing them, so that people are spending their money on American ships, taking their vacations in America,
Yeah.
On
Yeah, and it sort of didn't make sense because, in the 1930s, you have, like, the national symbols of Queen Mary. Obviously, there were other ships, but for this topic, you have Queen Mary as sort of like the big British liner for Cunard White Star, and then you have Normandy for French line. And yeah, those symbols, but where are they both going? To the United States. So you have French line and Cunard White Star, but they both end up in the same place in New York City.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the questions sort of I always asked was like, well, we can build ships. We build huge ships. Lexington and Saratoga are some of the biggest ships on the planet when they're finished. It's like, well, why don't we have an ocean liner? And you might say, well, let the British and the French spend their money. But it begs the question, why didn't we have something like that? And certainly after World War II, to your point, I know this is going to sound, but it's okay. I was going to say, we won World War II, in a very American style way. Okay, obviously, it's an allied thing. British, French, Soviet Union, that kind of deal. But there's this, very much this American pride that is born out of World War II, and say, you know what? Like, yes, we need this national status symbol.
Mm-hmm.
We need, and to what you just said, well, we could use a bunch of ships that, could be troop transports. I mean, who knows where we have to go in the future? Like you said, we just spent all this time bringing the army back, but if the Soviet Union, forces their way through Europe, we got to send them all back. So, time to go.
And also those guys are now leaving the army, coming back into the workforce. We need to continue to build projects.
And this is still, again, and this is in the late 40s. We're getting towards the 50s, especially when United States and her sister ship, America, I believe.
Near sister.
Not full-size sister.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth in that, like, they're kind of like running mates, but they're not sisters, like, in terms of the same class.
Yeah. They've got some commonalities, but they're not identical designs.
Exactly. And so, but SS United States being the biggest, the one we're focusing on here, the one that's that direction, and the one that's sort of future is not bright here, potentially.
Which is a shame because the other one's futures have all been cut short.
Yeah.
With a very, very small number of exceptions. Queen Mary got a fortunate second life.
Exactly. Queen Mary, Queen Mary herself has been in the news, for her own struggles.
Yeah.
Seemingly kind of coming back.
Mm-hmm.
They've made the investment. Repairs have happened. Seemingly like there's some life from there. So it's certainly, I think, possible. But so United States. So Gibbs and Cox, we finally were able to build, those two ships. And of course, SS United States being the shining example, William Francis Gibbs gets to sort of realize his dream of building sort of this grand ocean liner. It is very different, though, to the to Queen Mary and Normandy ships that were built sort of in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
There's Art Deco, but also a lot of like heavy wood influence and sort of like the luxury feel that was.
Yeah.
Whereas United States, she pulls on sort of like very much the 1950s. So lightweight materials, a lot of aluminum. I think everything had to be like fireproof.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally everything had to be fireproof.
After what happened in Normandy.
Yep, exactly. Which, good job, government.
Yeah. It was one of America's not great things during World War II.
Yeah, so we requisitioned Normandy because obviously France has fallen. So France itself can't do anything with it. So Normandy
interred in New York Harbor
is just interred, marooned essentially in New York Harbor. The United States, we're going to take that, turn it into a troop ship. In the process of gutting it, the thing catches fire in New York, and then it rolls over and sinks, and that's the end of that. Okay. So you know what? We don't need we don't need fires on our ocean liners. Obviously, as we know from any wartime experience, fire on board ship is bad regardless. So everything on United States is fireproof, down to like the beds, all the material, the carpeting, like all the bars and the fixtures. Everything is aluminum, It's just, it has this very modern 1950s feel.
You have to respect Gibbs' attention to detail. He's looked at everything that's gone right and wrong in the entire field of ocean liner development.
Yeah.
And when he decides that it will not be a fire that destroys this ship, he goes all in on that. Not like, we're going to reduce the amount. No, there will be none.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's pretty interesting. And so but at the same time, Queen Mary is also still operating. Mm-hmm. So she's brought back to so it's kind of, at the same time, you do have this sort of contrast between sort of the 1930s luxury and maybe modern sort of futuristic feeling luxury. So very interesting. And United States for a period of time is pretty popular. Oh, yeah. She has a career, presidents, movie stars, everything. She became, in her own way, just as popular as the previous pre-war ships. But by the 1960s, though, air travel, jets. Yeah. In just a few short years, all of a sudden, air travel is now, kind of mainstream. And now you can get from the European continent to the U.S. continent in...
It's the same thing we see with New Jersey. You get this really thoroughbred apex design that comes out right at the end, the absolute end of their design period. And then aircraft come in and ruin everything. Yeah. And so very quickly, United States then kind of falls out of sort of normal service and then, has sort of like a rocky, sort of like, second and third career, as some of those ships do. They bounce around. And then ultimately is sort of taken out of service. Do we know when was when was it gutted? I can't remember. Was it the 90s or was it the 80s? I think it was later. I think it was the 90s.
Yeah,
but don't quote me on that.
So right now, as she's been over there since the early 2000s, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So ever since I can remember coming to Philadelphia as a kid, like, I could remember seeing United States as two red funnels poking above, when you drive by on any of the various highways. And I always thought it was kind of interesting, like that you had this ocean liner sitting there and, every year it just kind of got a little bit worse,
Yeah.
And of course now, it's whatever. I think the interior had a lot of asbestos in it, which is what was kind of a common thing. Of course, as we just talked about, sort of the fire protection sort of theme in the build. So the entire interior of the United States has been gutted. Now, you were lucky enough. Some people have gone on sort of the abandoned tours and stuff like that. You've been inside the United States. You went, a year or two ago? 3 years now? I forgot when that series of videos came out.
I don't do dates as well as you do. It was probably about 2 years ago.
Okay. Do you... So you must have some opinions and some thoughts about the interior of the ship and the condition of the ship as it sits right now.
And I have to say that my opinions changed entirely from having only seen her from the outside, like you said, every time we drive past, you see the paint flaking off a little bit more, to actually getting inside of the vessel. Looking at her from the outside after all this time, she looks rough. You don't really see rust or corrosion, but you can see the paint flaking off, and it looks rough. Mm-hmm. And you have to assume that, without climate control on the inside, without dehumidification, without...
that ship over there is probably hotter than it is right now in here, which is hard to believe, but yeah.
Without power, with portholes being broken and the weather being able to get on the inside, she must be in bad shape, right? I was very fortunate in that one of my coworkers here also worked as a second job over there, and was able to get us on board and give us a non-standard tour. We got to go to some of the places that when they sell tickets rarely to get on board, they don't take it. She was able to take us, and I specifically asked, can we see the worst parts of the ship? Mm-hmm. And there are active museum ships in this country that are functioning perfectly fine that have worse spots than the United States. Her interior, obviously completely gutted, so it's just like the interior metal, but it's immaculate. There's no rust, even where dissimilar metals are coming together where there should be. There's very little corrosion. There's no standing water of any significance. Mm-hmm. That ship is in ridiculously good shape on the inside.
Considering it's basically been sat open, exposed for 20 years.
Yeah, and not to say anything bad about the caretakers.
Of course
the ship.
not. It's just
They don't have the funding to go in and like rehab spaces. That they are.
It's not a museum ship, so like why would they?
They are maintaining her. They're not preserving her.
Yeah.
And they're doing that. She is maintained as good on the inside as she must have been 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and the outside, the outside looks rough, but that's nothing like a couple jets and and some new paint could. It's not like there's gigantic rust holes and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Ships don't sink from the outside; they sink from water getting inside and rusting through from there.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to see any evidence of that. I'm certainly not the leading expert, but I have a few years of experience, and getting to go on board that ship radically changed my opinion of her and what her prospects are.
And I think that's certainly like what the average public, person in the public would think too. Like you see the pictures of the outside and you're like, that thing is completely toast. Like scrap it. There's no point, Mm-hmm. But again, as just finishing New Jersey's yard period, you can say, well, a lot of the work would just be making the outside look pretty. Oh, yeah. And if the outside paint looked pretty, you might actually look at the inside, given its current state, and say, actually, this isn't too bad,
I really, really love what Eastern State Penitentiary did in that they opened up as an abandoned ruin. Mm-hmm. And people loved it and went there. That's another museum within a couple of miles of the battleship here. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend you go visit them when you're in town. Mm-hmm. And people loved it, exploring this abandoned ruin. And over time, I can't remember how long that former penitentiary's been operating as a museum now, but they've been able to make enough money from that to start to restore parts of the building, and they've certainly stabilized it so that there isn't further deterioration happening. And getting to go on United States is a very similar experience. It's cool, and I think people would flock just to see that. Would it be enough to preserve the ship? No, probably not, but enough to continue the process? I believe so.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's something like $60,000 a month?
That's a number that I've heard. I don't know how reliable the source is.
But it's a lot of money, though.
Yeah.
So somewhere in that ballpark, that $60,000-ish a month, give or take, mm-hmm. to keep the ship tied there, mm-hmm. month after month, year after year, 2 decades, that's incredible. What ballpark? What's your average monthly expense for New Jersey?
Oh man, I'm not privy enough to the financial situation here to say that. We're roughly a $6 million a year operation right now. So you divide that by 12 months. Mm-hmm. So that ends up $500,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So they're
in total operating costs.
Yeah, and that's with a staff on board, with doing maintenance
mm-hmm.
continuously, with running air conditioning and power and things like that.
Gotcha.
And we don't have to pay a cent to use the pier because we own our pier.
Well, right. So, but I guess case in point, you are making money and doing all these sort of operational things. They're not. That's $60,000 a month from a ship that does literally nothing.
Yeah.
So the biggest question is, where's that money coming from? And of course, you get donations, and they do fundraising and other things like that. But obviously, that itself is not sustainable. Like it's a incredible amount of money for something to just sit there and continue to rust, at least on the outside. And I think ultimately, as we heard, the other week, that I think that time is finally coming to an end. So right now, I think, as we mentioned, they're being asked to move the ship mm-hmm. by what? September?
By September.
Mid-September.
So about 3 months from when the order went out to when they have to move the ship. I think it's a good thing. Because that ship has sat there for 30 years.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of maintain and just kind of, so now it might actually force you into like really getting off and,
It might be the fundraising bump that they need, that creating the need now that we have to move. Maybe that's going to be the fundraising bump that they need to actually go somewhere that wants them. That's not going to charge them out the ear and where they can actually open up and operate.
I don't know, but obviously, I think Queen Mary being in Long Beach is a mistake, and that's no offense to Queen Mary or to Long Beach.
Okay.
And obviously, Long Beach, California, you think this is a great place, yada, yada, yada. I don't think anyone in Long Beach actually cares.
There's no connection.
She didn't operate out there. And I think the average person in Long Beach goes, what is, who cares?
Like the replica of Titanic.
It'd be... Okay. Yeah, so true. Where is that, Gatlinburg? Or...
Oh, no, I was referring to Queen Mary as the...
Yeah.
Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
Yeah, the Titanic Museum. That's
largest
there.
Titanic museum in mid-Tennessee.
Yeah, cool. And I have said this for a while, and it could be Queen Mary. Obviously, Queen Mary's not going anywhere, so it's irrelevant. But United States, if you could rehab, like, the United States Line Pier, or one of those ocean liner piers from there. Like nowadays, you can still walk past the space where Titanic would have pulled up. You know, it's not, obviously a lot of the big infrastructure has come down, but like the gate is still there, and so a lot of those sort of small piers, or a lot of those piers still exist. They're just obviously not in use, and things have changed a little bit. But imagine if you could rehab like the United States Line Pier, and you could bring it back and and fully revitalize the full thing and stylize it and everything else, and you had the ship.
And we know that works because Intrepid is in one of those cruise liner piers.
Yeah. Like, Intrepid is on that line, and Intrepid is huge.
More than 1 million visitors a year.
Exactly.
Which is orders of magnitude more than we get here in Camden.
Right. And so my only thought is, if you use the pier and you had onshore installations like for like potentially like dining or the museum or the United States. I'm assuming here that United States is rebuilt as a hotel, kind of like Queen Mary. So someone would have to buy the ship, obviously spend the money, rehab the pier, and then completely rebuild the interior of the ship, like completely rebuild it. But that might not be such a bad thing because it's already gutted. You don't have to preserve anything. You can literally do whatever you want to it. Now, I'm assuming that you would like make some spaces feel like the original ship. To kind of give some of that original vibe, but you could make completely modern staterooms. Like you could have hotel rooms that maybe did fit the original vibe for people who wanted that like really ridiculous experience.
The Jetsons, 1950s.
But you could also have like it could just be like a modern Marriott or something like that.
Real estate in New York is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And Intrepid's already doing the museum ship thing. You don't want to compete with that. So pull United States into New York, somewhere nearby, with all the visitation there. Yeah. She's essentially 2-3 city blocks long of free real estate.
How often do you
free
get
real
that
estate in
New York City? How often do you get that?
So mixed use restaurants, hotels, some museum spaces, but not like a full on museum ship like Intrepid or New Jersey.
Right.
Have other organizations come in and do their retail operations or whatever out of office space. Like, you've got this tremendous amount of space in New York City ready to go.
So obviously, like, the upfront cost to rehab the ship, get it up there, and rehab a pier. Obviously, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money, obviously. But over, a period of a decade, think about what kind of money printer that could be for the group that controlled and ran that, between the hotel, between the operation. And just from the investment standpoint, you're going to need, I think that's where they need to really look and to think, give the people of New York sort of that taste of maybe like the pre-60s, when the ocean liners, because you see those pictures, right, of all the, I think I have that picture of where like Queen Mary, United States, like there's a bunch of pictures where all these ocean liners are all like tied up one after one, and you're like, wow, that's incredible to think that on the daily you have these ginormous, gorgeous ships constantly in and out of those piers and the river and everything.
We're nostalgic. Like, look at all the period pieces that come out and how good they do. Like, if you did one of those shows as a modern thing instead of a period piece, it just wouldn't do as well. We're very nostalgic. So, it's a great idea. If Queen Mary proves it can work in a less than ideal circumstance, being able to put one of these in New York City.
And especially because, Queen Mary has the history to be a museum ship, and obviously the wartime career, but she's also British. You know what I mean? And, and again, everyone's like, oh, that's just, is that Titanic sitting, or whatever, It's like, but, an American ship,
We're now 2 or 3 generations away from anyone who's ever ridden on an ocean liner.
Yeah.
Some of us have done cruise ships, but that's a completely different thing than an ocean liner.
Yeah. The only ocean liner, I believe that's actually left and labeled an ocean liner is Queen Mary 2. That's still operated by White Star Cunard. I actually was like thinking about booking a trip, but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And you go on the website and it's like in like huge print. It's like, this is not a cruise ship. Like, this is an ocean liner. It's like, we have black tie dinners and like your children are not going to run around and run amok and like don't even bring them if you think that they're going to be like anything less than perfect. It's like, this is not a cruise ship.
Yeah.
And they still try to maintain and operate that. And they still actually run that same sort of route too. It's just, but it's not exactly the same. While the Queen Mary 2 Queen Mary is like, they take cruise liner technology, like cruise technology, and kind of like built it into a hull form that would still be more ocean liner than it is cruise ship that sort of just sits off in the Caribbean and floats around. Something that can handle sort of larger seas, but it's not like the grand, really long, like, well, actually I take that back. The ship is huge, but, you don't have the big funnels and everything else. And I guess that's a good thing. You're not getting covered in.
Yeah, everybody who's watching this has the view of what an ocean liner looks like in their head. The Titanic or Queen Mary or United States.
Right. Yeah. Queen Mary 2 is basically one little funnel that's basically just an exhaust pipe for the diesels. It's like, which again, technically I guess is a good thing versus having all this
just belching coal smoke into the air,
or fuel smoke or whatever, fuel oil. Especially the coal from back in the day. But so anyway, I really think that the United States could have a legitimate future. Like I do see, versus just saying I can't see something that the ship would be good for, but we still just need to save it anyway.
You asked me this question 2 or 3 years ago, sight unseen, and I would have said, there's no way. Queen Mary's not doing well. United States is in no condition to operate. But you tell me that now, with the economy a little bit better, with the plans that they have, working with the development company in the New York area to try and make this happen, having seen the inside of the ship.
I think if, and you're right, the move could force something to happen. And it could force the change that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened if you were just kind of complacent and just used to paying out. So who knows, I think it would be an absolute. I've seen a lot of comments in other videos and of the news and on social media where people are just like, "Oh, the ship's so far gone, scrap it." I think that would be an absolute travesty. I think it would be just such a loss, to scrap that ship, and especially when you can see what it could be. It could be that shimmering glint, like in New York Harbor. So
and scrapping her isn't on the table right now, to be clear. If they have to move the ship, they're just going to take her to another pier, and where the rent is not as expensive.
You're not getting evicted to the ocean where it's just like the tugboats drag you out and be like, have fun, and now what,
Yeah, so they have this great chance to do the publicity, to make it to the next step finally, like they've been trying to do for all this time.
Yeah.
But if they don't make this chance, that's not the end of the opportunity. She goes somewhere else, and another chance will come up in the future.
Yeah. So let us know what you think about ocean liners in general and SS United States. Do you think the ship is well beyond its useful life? Do you think that it would actually serve a greater purpose and actually would be worthwhile to rehab into a hotel space up in New York or maybe another city? But I think New York has the history though with the ocean liners to make that connection.
Oh, that's definitely the best case scenario. Like if for whatever reason it's not possible to do in New York, there are other cities that could do it, and it would be great. But New York is the best.
I think that's, and you can make like a museum ship trip out of it. You could stay on United States and then walk up the pier.
Exactly. You go to the fancy restaurant in the United States. You sleep on the United States. You go down a couple of piers and you see Intrepid.
Yeah, I think that would just be like wonderful.
Yeah.
That would be so great. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching. Again, comment down below. Like and subscribe if you do like these videos. We appreciate you watching. Ryan, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you next time.
See ya.